word compassion came to mind, not in a kind of a stop sign sort of way, but it kind of presented itself as a continual word in my mind ever since I knew I was going to lead the discussion today. Compassion. Where does that come from? What's the need for it? Who shows it best? Why do I sometimes lack compassion? And why is it incumbent upon the Father to put me in positions where compassion is needed before anything else? What I want to do today is just speak about having a heart for the people and individuals in the kingdom, because that's what Jesus did. And that's what drew people to him, and then he discipled them. And I think that as a simple model is a place that we can kind of lead into. So in my research about the word compassion over the last couple of weeks and looking at different things and going out, I do a lot of research. I'm actually an investigator in my life and training and things. I was in law enforcement, so I'm an investigator. I kind of dig for the root cause. I'm not an engineer, but I know what it means to get to the root cause of a problem. If you put up Post-it charts, you can put Post-it notes up. If there's a problem and something breaks down, before things broke down, there was things that kind of indicated that something was going to break down. A wheel falls off a car. Well, did you go out and check the lug nuts before you went for the next drive? That kind of thing. Something had to happen before the catastrophe occurred. And so, what's the root cause of this? What I want to be able to get to for us to disciple others or to be discipled. What's that need? And where do we go with that? What do we access that with? And in my research, I came across an interview or a short dialogue where a question was asked of a group of pastors in a Q&A, in a symposium, where one of the questioners, and I'm going to play this for you. It's just going to take a couple minutes, not even a couple minutes, just a few seconds of a quote. And then think about the word compassion in this. Big Barry and I have had breakfast on occasion in the last several months, and we get to this. We start to talk about this. So I'm going to play this brief quote. It'll and then I'll explain it afterwards why it resonates with me. But listen to this for a moment, and then I'll give I'll acknowledge and credits where they're due.
The greatest threat is to the church in our generation. It's pastors. Honestly, the pastors. Anywhere, God has given 3 offices, I believe, to the church: evangelist, pastor, and teacher. Wherever you see a weak church, you see these weak men. Either they're non-existent, they're unbiblical, or they're unconverted. And
that pierced me when I heard that. And I think it should pierce everybody who sits in a pew on Sunday morning or prepares to speak to the people at a small group, at a breakfast, at a fellowship type gathering. But when somebody says, what do you think the problem is with the church today? And I'm going to say the problem for us as we explore it with discipleship today can be focused not just on a group of laity, a group of pastors, but on the church itself, to say, where have we dropped the ball? And where is it incumbent upon us to pick it up and turn back and say, okay, God, give me what I need to speak to the next person. And so as I was going through this, the word compassion constantly came to mind. Now it's glaring in my eyes. Now I'm hearing it pound in my ears. Compassion. I'm not the most compassionate kind of guy. Let's get to the justice of it. Who did the wrong? What's the crisis? Who participates in this? and then we can move on. What's the root cause of the problem? Let's find that. Let's correct that and move on. Now, that tends to be my nature. Over the last few years, I've had to pray that God fills me with compassion. Our family has had a crisis for the last 4 years now that we've been experiencing. And it's caused a lot of carnage in us in marriage and things with our daughter and her children and things. And I've had to ask for compassion for the people involved in this. And what has happened is that it's kind of laid bare the fact that I don't have a heart of compassion up front. I will say that I have friends over the years who would say, "No, Steve, you're very compassionate," blah, 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 blah. But I think it's situational. It's for people I choose to be compassionate with. So let me go back to this. Jesus, in the beginning of his ministry, was just a guy walking around. I love how The Chosen shows him. He's making toys and things. He's camping out by the creek. He's outside the city. He's demonstrating something that is not identified. But when people come up to him, he looks them in the eye. When we look people in the eye, we are either now involved in their life and can see it for what it is, or we don't look them in the eye because we don't have the time, we're too busy, or that's not the person I'm interested in having compassion with or discipling. I can go there quickly. This is a person whose life I want to be involved in. This is a person whose life I'm going to outright reject. And it depends on how I use my eye on them, whether I engage them and I look them in the eye. And my next birthday, I'll be 62. So I've run across a lot of people. And when I came across this video about pastors and the church itself, I'm going to broaden that. What's the problem with this broken discipleship model that we have that we're exploring? I travel extensively, and I know that in most major capitals in the world, there is an international group of evangelical Protestants who meets daily, weekly, every Sunday. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were in Tirana, Albania. We were at a church that was actually a very interesting place to be. There was the sermons were interpreted from English into Albanian. And then as they were speaking, I learned that there were many people there who speak Farsi, recent immigrants from Iran. And while we were worshiping, I looked at the man sitting in front of me. He didn't seem to be a man of means. He was content to be there. But while we were singing about the love of the Lord, he was weeping. Now I can identify him. I looked at him and I knew that he was Middle Eastern. And I believe that he was actually one of these Persian brothers who's come to faith. And I had a heart of compassion towards him. Why? Because he was weeping and enjoying the fact that Jesus loves him. And that moved me. And at the same time, I'm thinking about this talk and I'm looking at him and I'm looking around the room thinking that there's not just a remnant on earth of who loves Jesus, but there's a large group of people who love Jesus. And we need to, if we want to disciple all these folks, our heart of compassion needs to grow. So in John 11, there's a place where, and we know the story. I'm not going to read it to you, but in John 11, Jesus is going to visit Mary and Martha because their brother Lazarus has died. What's the thing that we get in John 11? Jesus wept, right? In that picture there, what led him to weep for the condition of the people around him? And again, I'm going to reference something in the Chosen, where it shows him looking around the group and he weeps, but he weeps deeply. His heart of compassion is pierced for these people because they have no idea what's about to happen, but they could have known what's going to happen. There could have been a moment where they learn more about who Christ is among them. There's another passage in Matthew 9, verse 35 to 38, where Jesus goes through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom. And when he sees the crowd, He has compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like a sheep without a shepherd, without one person to look them in the eye to say, let's talk. Tell me your story. Without one person who had compassion on them. And that broke him up. It broke him up around the tomb of Lazarus. And amongst his disciples, it breaks him. You can see his heart in this. And I'm convinced that God has given us that heart. The Father has opened us up a little bit to say, this matters in how I approach the people I fellowship with, the people who lead me into worship, with the people who teach me on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday evening or Saturday sometimes, depending on what churches I go to. Am I there because they care for me, or am I there because I seek to be vulnerable in front of them? You know, what's the compassion that I feel towards me? Who has that compassion with me, and why does that make me go back to that kind of person? John Maxwell wrote a book of Becoming a Person of Influence, and he said leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. But in the Christian world, in our churches, influence comes from the person standing at the pulpit. But I think that more so influence comes from that time between worship and the time of worship and fellowship and worship, and the time of teaching and the fellowship and teaching. There's that brief part where many churches in liturgy say, hey, turn and face each other and say good morning. In the Anglican church, they say, share the peace of Christ with another person. And you look at somebody and shake their hand and say, hey, peace of the Lord be upon you. And in the Anglican church is saying, the peace of the Lord be upon you. And we should look each other in the eye when we say that, or have that compassion. The way we see people significantly impacts how effective we are at leading them or at discipling them. The story of the Good Samaritan, that's another. Why did Jesus tell that parable? Because there was the most unlikely person in the whole culture at that time. The whole political, economic, social culture at that time. The most unlikely person showed the most compassion. There's a statement there. The other night, I'm part of something called C4C, Convicted for Christ, out here. And part of it is a homeless ministry. On Wednesday night, we had a memorial for 25 homeless people that have died on the street in the last year and a couple months, just in the Oceanside area. And one of my great friends, who was homeless himself for about 15 years, leads this ministry. And I went because God is piercing my heart with this word of compassion for what my friend is doing for the homeless in this area. So I've had to learn that. He is the most unlikely guy to do that because he lived that way. Yet his heart is, once Jesus got a hold of his heart, Jesus gave him an eye and an ear for the people that are most hurting in our community. That's compassion. And I want a little bit more of that. And I get that from a guy named Michael. There's four images that we have for relationship and leadership. And one is the host. And I'm going to use some of these words and things. Again, a lot of this comes from Maxwell's book, a person of influence, becoming a person of influence. And I like Maxwell because I'm also a business person. And so I can use a lot of these concepts when I talk to people in a business sense, because the truth actually matters to many people in our Fortune 500s and our Fortune 100s and multinational companies. But being a host means that we start a relationship with somebody. And Big Barry's really good in reminding us that discipleship is relationship. Discipleship is taking on and committing time to another person in relationship. And we do it as Christians, we do it based on the understanding that fellowship is good, that God talks to us in fellowship. But if one of us is kind of farther back down the path than we are, we're to bring them along. That's discipleship. We're to bring them into a level of spiritual maturity that they can look behind them and bring another one along. At the same time, I'm looking ahead. I'm saying, hey, I want to be more like that guy up there. We all wouldn't be like Jesus, but there's a guy in front of him. Say, I want to be more like him. Why does he do it so well? I'm asking for somebody to host me and be a friend to me and disciple me. There's this narrow path, and all these people are strung out along the path, and we should be looking back, and we should be looking forward to take that next step with somebody else, being the host and inviting people into those relationships. Another analogy of a person of influence is the doctor. Doctors ask questions. They probe to get to the root cause of the problem. We should be able to do that. That's why looking people in the eye is so important for me. When I look someone in the eye, they're inviting me into their head and their heart. And when people engage us eye to eye, sometimes they are shocked that we're willing to look them in the eye. Have you ever tried this? Have you ever tried that with the cashier at the store? So, hi, what's your name? Hi, Emily, how are you? And look her in the eye. And in my head, I'm thinking, Jesus has something for you. Do we do that? It's risky. It's really risky. But when was the last time I looked my wife in the eye and said, sweetheart, I do love you. I love you. It's hard to do because we're so busy. But looking people in the eye is saying, hey, I want to know you better. I want to know you more. I have something for you. Okay. And it's part of me. It's my heart that's reaching out. And I don't get that heart naturally. Again, I'm going to go back to that. Jesus is putting that heart in me for others. The analogy of the counselor. So we talked about the host, the doctor, and the counselor. Counselors do what well? They listen. They back off their agenda. They back off their needs. And they ask the question, tell me your story. And then sit and listen for the story. And the people that we often ask this of don't know their story enough to tell it. We'll be patient with that. There's something that says Jesus had eternal patience with people. Thank you. Right? But he has this heart of compassion and an awareness of people that says, what's going on? Who did he say? What was it? The blind man? Do you want to be healed? No, the paralyzed guy. Want to be healed? Yeah. But he gave the person a moment to reflect in themselves of what their need really was. When Jesus looks us in the eye, he says, yeah, I know you need to be healed, but what you really need is just forgiveness of sins and enjoy my grace and mercy. That's what you really need. And he doesn't have to say that all the time. He says it after he does the act, doesn't he? He says it after he heals the blind, after he touches people's ears, after he heals the lame and the sick. He says, now go and sin no more. He says it in such a way that it quickly goes deep. But when we as counselors take time to sit with another person for coffee or on a park bench, whatever it is, on an airplane, oh my goodness, spend a lot of time in airplanes. When we look at the person, we say, hey, hi, my name is Steve. What's your name? Oh, my name is so-and-so. Hi, how are you? Where are you from? And you get into it. Next thing, I have to say this in my head. Lord, why do you have me sitting next to this person? I really just want to bury my head in my book. I want to watch a movie. I have Bose. I have Bose noise canceling headphones. I don't think Jesus would intentionally wear noise canceling headphones when he's in the crowd. The woman who is sitting there, who needs his touch, who touches the hem of his garments, Jesus isn't the guy wearing headphones at that moment. I'm talking to myself here, but so I cannot put those in immediately unless the person's totally uncommunicative, and I've had those. We can engage in the conversation, but I have to say in my heart, Lord, why am I speaking to her? Why do you have me sitting next to this guy? Is it because you want? And maybe they're a believer. Maybe they just need to be encouraged in the Lord. Cool. Maybe they want nothing to do with it. You can tell how people lean in and lean out. That's the heart of a counselor who knows that when they're asking these questions. Another component of a person of influence is the tour guide. Tour guides don't merely hang out with other people, but they get them to a destination. We have people in our lives who reject Christ altogether. You know, they have a destination. And why is it God has us in front of those people who kind of just stiff arm us, who don't want anything to do with Christ? but we keep bumping up against them on occasion. You know why? Because there's something working in their heart. I believe this firmly, that the people who reject us the most or the loudest are afraid their heart's going to crack open to the truth that Jesus loves them. They're that close, and that's why they fight that hard. And I need to be persistent in that, in compassion, in understanding, in grace, not beating them over the head, with my Christianese or my Christian words, but just looking them in the eye and saying, "Hey, Steve, how are you doing today? Good to see you. Yeah, everything all right? How's your wife? How are your kids? How's work? Steve, you tell me about Jesus again, I'm going to hit you over the head. I know, brother." And then walk away and go, "Lord, make yourself real to him." We can do that. We can do that with the person who wants to stiff arm us because of the truth of Christ. So part of this is the role of nurturing and having this heart of compassion. Colossians 3:12 says, "As God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with," you guys know this, "compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." I'd like to say that if I see someone who needs peace, love, joy, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, I know I have them a little bit turned around, but that's the way I memorized them years ago. I can identify quickly what that person needs, understanding what the Spirit is in my life, who the Spirit is in my life, and who energizes me for others, is to lead them with a word of kindness, with a word of gentleness, with a word of patience. It's always leading my heart in self-control, but it's guiding others with a word of peace, love, and joy. Jesus did that. I think that was the fruit of the Spirit, is those characteristics of Christ that I can't access in my humanity. In my manhood, I can't access that. But in the reality of my body now being a temple and the Spirit of God living in me and God living in me, now I can ask for those when I'm next to that next person who needs one of those words applied and poured over their lives. There's a lot of intentionality here, but I'm learning as I get older that I have to prepare my heart for those moments of interacting with people. And with that, looking them in the eye, we can encourage them. Now, if the person's a believer and we're discipling them and we're moving them down that path, they're ones that we're bringing up and equipping to bring others up as we move along this path towards eternity, then we can encourage them and teach them to encourage others. And I think that's part of what our hearts are at for this discussion in this discipleship discussion, is we need to encourage others as we encourage others. We need to encourage each other as we encourage others. And I find that energizing. Those kinds of things make me smile. It makes me smile as I get into it and I go, "Oh, Lord, you're working here. That's cool. Thank you. I need more of that. That's good." I feel this energy that I can't conjure up myself. I get tired some days. But if I say, "Lord, this is Saturday. I've got this group of guys I'm talking to on Zoom this morning. After this, I'm going to meet with somebody named Bob. Give me your word for him today. Bob loves you. He's having a hard day, but give me your word for him." And Bob would let me say this. He had a heart attack 3 weeks ago. He had an imminent meeting with the Father. Okay, he survived that, and now he says, "Hey, let's talk about God more." Dude, I'm there. Okay. But that's the sort of thing that we're called to, having the compassion to do that and to encourage. And there's recognition, there's respect that goes on in all this. It's the humanity of people who either know the Father or don't, either lean into the truth of who Christ is or reject that, although their hearts are bursting for that. We are the ones who stand in that place. And our compassion matters to them. And then finally, hope. Are we hopeful guys? Are we hopeful people? Do we live in hope. And do people see that about us? Is that infectious in the next person? I lived in China for many years, and I worked for a multinational company, and I intentionally wore a chain with a cross on it. And we didn't wear ties in the office. We would wear ties for official events or when we were meeting government officials or something. But I wore a chain with a cross on it intentionally because I wanted people to ask about that, because it's an uncommon symbol in China, in Beijing. And my executive assistant actually quickly caught on to that. She said, "Steve, what is that?" I said, "Oh, this is a cross." I said, "Have you ever heard the name Jesu, Jesus, in Mandarin, Jesus?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, kind of. You might hear it in the movies sometimes. What's it mean?" And so we would do something. Her name was Jackie. I won't forget Jackie. I gave her an English Mandarin Bible. Great tool, okay, to practice her English. And I put a post-it note at the beginning of John and at the end of John. I said, "Read this. Don't worry about the rest of it. But read this, and then come back and ask me questions." Well, she fed on it, and then I said, "Now say these words before you read it again. Dear God, if what Steve says is true, may your Spirit teach me. May your Spirit teach me." And within about a month, she gave her heart to Jesus. We got her connected with a local community, with a local believing community there, and she's thriving. But there's hope there for every single person. We have to be willing to be creative, look people in the eye, and offer this hope and encouragement, love and compassion to every single person God brings in our path. And it can be the tire changer at Costco, okay? Just for a moment. It's the briefest of moments, but that kind of compassion, that kind of intentionality as a disciple maker not only changes us, because you know what? We need to be changed daily, don't we? We need to be able to be in front of the Father saying, "Lord, work in me today. Here I am, the empty vessel, the broken jar, whatever it is, but use me as I am." And I think what happens is discipleship becomes more natural for us. It's not something that we're striving for, but it's the relationship where discipling someone is bringing them along the path so that they can bring another one along the path. Relationship and loving one another as Jesus does, not as he did, but as he does. Present tense. The man Jesus who died on the cross, who was resurrected, is still the man. We believe that he exists, that he's sitting at the right hand of the Father, but not only that, he moves amongst us in his Spirit. Okay? As Jesus does, we are to do. And as a leader involved in discipleship, there's one more part of this. Who do I allow to disciple me? Who do I ask to teach me, to encourage me? To whom am I known and vulnerable with? That goes all the way back to that little video that I played for you about the pastor. Our pastors today, some of them are not vulnerable enough in their own hearts to seek friendship, to seek a small group, to be fed themselves. My father was a pastor, and he said that it's the loneliest job in the world. He said, "It's hard because I'm not allowed to have a friend in this group because people get jealous. People get wrapped around the axle. They're spending too much time with Jimmy. Jimmy's an elder. And, Jimmy's the guy that I play golf with now, once a month or something." Or he said, "I'm not allowed to do that." So who pastors the pastor? And I think that's what led that question and the answer from that one gentleman to say the problem right now in the church are pastors. And my heart of hearts wants to lean into that. I see a lot of them. And I can immediately kind of start to identify the broken ones and the ones who are thriving. There are thriving pastors. There are good pastors there. But those that are hurting, the congregation knows something's wrong and they can't identify it, but they're there trusting. So I think that part of this discipleship discussion is how do we, as pastors, as laity leaders, whatever our role is in the kingdom, encourage our pastors. And where does that lead this discussion further? Who do we invite into this discussion to say, this is where we're at right now in this discussion. Join us in this, because we feel as though God is leading us, the Spirit of God is leading us to say discipleship matters. Who are we equipping to be disciple makers? And at the same time, who's discipling us? So I'll close with this. May the God of hope fill you and me with all joy and peace as we trust him, so that we may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And then share that with the next person. I'm putting a comma there, and share that with the next person. So that's all I have for us.
I did look up the word compassion when you first started talking, and the root word was to suffer with. And then it kind of hit me how hard our job is as disciple makers, or want to be disciple makers if we're not good at it yet, or we're still in that process. But with your Bose headset, everybody's got one. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody's digging in. And the truth is, I think sometimes the ministry that I see a lot of people gravitate towards, and they talk about the most when you talk about compassion, to suffer with, is the people who are the most obviously suffering. I think that, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and it's the least of these, and it's the widows and the orphans, it's the homeless, it's the ministries that are created out of a great need. And the fact is, God's not a respecter of persons, and yet I think sometimes we think we have to be above somebody in order to be compassionate towards them. We have to somehow have something to offer them. And sometimes looking at the eye of your pastor, or looking in the eyes of your politicians, or your leaders, or your neighbor who maybe is more successful on some level than you, and recognizing they're created in the image of God, same as you, and offering them that cup of cold water, that encouragement, that word that will maybe strike at their heart. I thought also of, I think it's Philippians 2, where it talks about, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one spirit and one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility. Value others more than yourself, not only your own interest, but also to the interest of others. The interest of others are great. The ability to crack through that hard shell that most people have. It's not just you, Steve, that wants to dial in with your headset and focus and just get through this flight. It's everybody. You can walk into a crowded room of high school. I can walk to the local high school here is over 3,500 students. And there are very few of those students that are talking. Even the ones in circles are all on their phone. And so being able to look in their eyes, it really is next level. It's both ancient and future. It's the only way to be compassionate to somebody, to suffer with them, is to get off and to find a way to get them off of whatever is distracting them. Mm-hmm. And the only other thing that I thought of as you were talking was, years ago when I was in college, I approached an elder at a church that we were attending. We'd probably been in attendance for 6 months at this point. And he had said hi to me probably 4 or 5 times, because he sat really close to me and kind of usually in the aisle in front of me. Every time he introduced himself, it was obvious he had never looked at my face, because he always said the same thing: "Is this your first Sunday?" And I was shocked. I was like, "You not remember? I mean, how many bald guys sit behind you?" It was weird. But I asked him. I said, he mentioned he was in San Marcos, and that's where I was at. And I just said, "Hey, can we meet for lunch?" He said, "Why?" He was an elder at the church, doesn't recognize me, says, "Why do I want to meet with him?" During that time, he didn't listen to anything I said, but told me, he's like, "I don't really have time for this kind of thing. I'm an A person. You're kind of a C person, and I need to introduce you to one of my B people." And I think sometimes we miss God when we don't recognize that you can't suffer with anybody if you're looking just to move pegs on the board. And if you're looking at it like a chess game, Christ died. I mean, he didn't consider it too much to become a baby, to become flesh and die a death on the cross. If he can do that, why are we looking to position ourselves in such a way that we can't minister to the guy that is homeless, but also not exclude the guy that in this case, this elder was very wealthy. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know his last name. I found out he has a name that would be easily recognizable across the country. And I was disappointed in him. And you know what? I didn't want to talk to his B guy because I thought if they're being ministered to by this guy, it's not going in the right direction because they're not suffering with anybody. They're all trying to move up the ladder, if you will, in some sort of a secular way and call it Christian. It was weird. But all that to say, I think it's hard to suffer with people without being able to look them in the eye, like you said, and to reach out to them and to understand that whether they're on the same playing field as you or they're suffering in some way that you can't really comprehend, whether it be because they have an experience that's way past what you'll ever get to because it's not something you aspire to, or because they've struggled in ways you'll never struggle or haven't yet. I think there's still a way to connect with those people. There's still a way to suffer with those people, but our connection point has to be in Christ. It has to be, look, I love you because you're my brother, you're my sister, or you will be. If God, like if I can minister to you in such a way that you can get it, then that's the goal, and that's the ultimate suffering with somebody, is to get them to that place where they see their great need for Christ.
Well, I appreciate you sharing what you did, Steve. I couldn't help but think when you were unpacking the word compassion, I thought of Matthew 9, verse 36 that you referred to. This verse or two gives us a glimpse of the heart of God, what goes through his mind when he sees us. And it says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the labors are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out labors into his harvest. I believe wholeheartedly that God was saying, I'm going to give you a glimpse of what goes through my mind and heart when I see you and the people around. And I think he was saying, I'm illustrating this to you so you'll catch it. So, like Steve said, you look them in the eye, you make contact, you show them you care, you be intentional. And if you dig deeper, if you deep dive into this group of scriptures, you'll find that compassion comes from two words. One, it's from the gut, and the second means with a panic to do something. So it's looking at the person and feeling like, oh my, it's from the gut. There's a sense of not attraction, but oh, I see you're in pain. Ooh, that got me. And then it's a panic to do something. And those two words that make up compassion, it's almost violent. When I first studied this word, the picture that came to my mind was viewing an accident. You're engaged and you see it, and then you want to do something about it. And that's compassion. The other thing in the scripture that is so cool that helps you see and feel what Jesus did when he saw the crowds was he saw them and they were harassed and helpless. When you go down deep into these words, it's really alarming, because someone who's harassed or even helpless, it's like a boxer. It comes from a boxing term that the boxer with his opponent has hit so hard so many times his opponent that he is losing consciousness and losing strength, and he gets hit one more time and he falls to the ground without enough strength to get up. God saw the crowds, and some of them had been punched by this world so many times that they're walking around ready to fall without enough strength to get up. They were hunted down like a wild man or animal that even goes towards being brutally beaten up or raped. It's that violence. It's that they were kind of left with the effects emotionally and physically of being attacked. And so when you put that together with the sheep without a shepherd, that leads back to compassion, that he knew it, he felt it with a panic to do something. That's what you're saying, Steve. The Lord's compassion goes a lot deeper than a Hallmark card. And in this scripture, it refers to I need laborers, helpers, disciples that will act like this or respond like this when they engage a person or a group of people, even that of, hey, I'm ministering as a pastor to my congregation, but do you see them like where they are? And if you did, it would probably change what you preach and two, how you preach, because you see them where they are and what they need, and it changes you. So I thought it was really awesome that you used this word today, because the disciple and the disciple maker can't really be productive unless they are compassionate. You are compassionate because you have felt God's compassion on you that has changed you. And the residue of that is it's new lenses, it's new eyesight that you operate from. So I really enjoyed what you shared, because we really need this to
Barry,
know.
what you were just saying,
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that struck me when Steve was talking too that I didn't say is that without humility, compassion is impossible, and we really have to recognize that. That's such a huge part of it, is recognizing.
You're right.
You know, we what do we have to offer is Christ. And we're no better than anyone. They're no better than us. But at the same time, we have this accident in front of us. We have this horror show. These broken people who are stumbling and blind and moving about. Well, me too. Me too. I've been there.
A few years ago, Brandon Heath, I don't know, a singer, wrote a song, says, "Give me your eyes." You guys remember that song? Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the brokenhearted, the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see. When I heard that song years ago, that pierced me. I think that actually is one of the things that kind of started me on this journey of compassion and understanding compassion and the need for it, in my own life. But God's been compassionate with me. He's been very intentional with leading me in my heart into places where I need to grow. That's part of Him discipling me. And He's given me multiple opportunities to practice that with others when I'm aware of it. There's somebody else in my sphere of influence today that I need to be aware of. And if Jesus were to walk into that store, into that restaurant, if Jesus was actually in this place, how would He look at the people around me? How would He look at me and look at the people around me and saying, all right, you do this. He is sending us out 2 by 2s and 3 by 3. He is sending us out to interact with these people. He's looking at me going, I put you here. Do something with it.
Yeah.
And I put myself, I have to be aware of that. Okay, Lord, this is where you have me at this moment with these people. And I'll be honest with you, it happens pretty much first thing in the morning with my wife. How am I compassionate towards her? How am I, what kind of grace am I extending towards her? Or kindness? What are those 9 characteristics do I need with her right now? I have a friend. He's a counselor in Phoenix. He's real. His name is Steve, and he designed this. Can you guys see this? It's a heart with an arrow pointing up. It's on my coffee cup because this is the first thing I grab in the morning. And and then below that, that equation is a heart going to my left and to my right.
Yeah.
And he's designing this, and he's getting them to his clients and his small groups and stuff. Love God, love others.